Hey, Scott here from whattype.com. And earlier today, someone on Reddit asked me a really good question in the context of a conversation about extroverted feeling. So I thought I'd make a video about it and post it here. So, extroverted feeling. This is a function used primarily by feeler judgers, also thinker perceivers, but this is going to be more dominant in the personality of feeler judger types. So that's mostly who we're talking about here. And the question here is about whether or not extroverted feeling makes feeler judgers less likely to get into fights. The second part of the question here is also asking about personal values of extroverted feeling types. So do feeler judgers give great importance to their personal values like introverted feeling users? So I'll address the second part of the question first. So first what I'll do is I want to explain from my perspective what extroverted feeling is. So extroverted feeling, it's basically, I think of it more than anything as a sensitivity. So I feel like it's best explained that way, and we can sometimes, I think, go down confusing paths if we think of the function as being like some kind of an active process. In my mind, extroverted feeling is itself, the way that I conceptually understand it, it's passive. So what extroverted feeling is a sensitivity that tunes us into the frequency of harmony versus tension in interpersonal relationships. So generally speaking, feeler judger types like to have a very strong preference for being in harmonious social environments. And feeler judgers will generally get a lot of satisfaction out of creating harmony where there was previously chaos or tension. And also, generally speaking, feeler judger types will prefer to avoid being in tense situations, certainly being stuck in tense situations. And that has to do with the fact that there's a very real physiological response that feeler judgers will have to tension. It's like, I'm a feeler judger myself, I'm an INFJ, and it's like there's this involuntary, immediate, internal response in our bodies to tension. We feel it as though it's something happening to us. So that can be tension in a room, or that can be a negative emotion someone's experiencing. If someone's in a bad mood, it tends to affect us in a very direct way. There's no real buffer between us and that tension. So the question here, so again, to reiterate, does this make us more likely to get into fights, less likely to get into fights, and do we still place a great importance on personal values, considering the fact that some feeler judgers will tend to just want to avoid tension? So to answer the second part of the question, to the personal values of introverted feeling users he mentions here. So in particular, INFPs and ISFPs, they have this kind of these personal values, this personal value filter, like this supreme filter to everything. So like basically, if you violate their values, it really doesn't matter how inconvenient it might be. Like, you're really not going to get very far. You're going to have a very hard time if you are in any way violating that code. This is, in a sense, this is similar for feeler judgers. So intuitively, instinctively, we are offended, for example, by the idea of trampling on people's needs. So this can happen in some cases with thinker judgers. So thinker judgers using extroverted thinking as opposed to extroverted feeling, what can happen is that thinker judgers are, because this is extroverted thinking, a very valuable function in business. A lot of thinker judgers are in leadership positions in business. So what might happen is, thinker-judger becomes fixated on an outcome, and people are a necessary resource to help produce that outcome. And then in this equation, a person's needs are, inconvenient. So thinker-judgers will basically try and do whatever they can to make this person more like a machine, and just try and do whatever they can to minimize the interference from this person's needs. So a classic example of this is Jeff Bezos from Amazon being an INTJ. We've all heard these anecdotal stories about their warehouse employees peeing in bottles because they're afraid they might be docked pay, or even, maybe even fired if they spend more than the, allocated 37 seconds or whatever, I don't know, but, whatever time they give them to, for bathroom breaks. That's, Bezos is thinking about competition in the marketplace systems, basically creating the most efficient system and, dominating the entire world, or whatever, his ultimate goal is. So, feeler-judger types, we come from a perspective of just wanting to start with harmony. The end game for us is to produce greater emotions in people, greater harmony. That's just where we start from and where we seek to end. So it's just offensive to us in general, the idea of treating people like, objects or resources or machines. So we will tend to create a set of values around that inclination and that sensitivity to other people's needs. And if that's violated, we will tend to have a problem with it. So, some people will just avoid, and in some circumstances, all of us will just kind of avoid having to deal with tension. So this will have to do with for one, a person's general level of maturity and development in this area. So an immature person using FE or being in touch with their FE will tend to just avoid tension to a fault. They don't want to deal with those things. So that can happen sometimes. So you might not encounter them defending their personal values because they just don't want to deal with the tension. But I think most feeler-judgers will stand up for their values, and more often than not, they will stand up for other people. If they see someone being treated badly, I think in most cases feeler-judgers will go to bat for that person. There are a lot of factors in play. I mean, I would say that generally speaking, when things are cool, feeler-judgers will avoid doing things to rock the boat unless there's a real reason to. But generally speaking, we're going to want to keep the peace. There are going to be times, however, when we just see red. If something, if we see something, that's, I can say, like, for me personally, if someone is mean or cruel to another person, then I will become confrontational. Then it's a problem. You will see my personal values come out. So the overall question, though, of does extroverted feeling make a person less likely to get into a fight? I would say actually it does. My first inclination was to say no, I don't think so, because that sensitivity will make us in some cases more likely to want to defend people or defend our values. But I think what really happens, I looked at some celebrities who are feeler-judgers. In particular, ENFJs and ESFJs use this as a primary function, and they really aren't people who we think of as getting into fights. You know, I mean, people like Larry King, and Regis Philbin, and Kathy Lee Gifford, and Reba McEntire, Jason Mraz, some like you get. All right, so like for example, like Oprah Winfrey, like Oprah Winfrey would kick some ass if she had to. I don't think Oprah Winfrey's going to be the type to run away and hide. Like I think Oprah Winfrey would get into a fight if necessary. But generally speaking, I think the big factor that makes it so that feeler judges are less likely to get into fights is because we're aware of the general social consequences of getting into fights. It is a lot. We just instinctively know that we're going to have to deal with consequences after the fact, and we know that we are going to have to deal with some tension. So if we get into a fight with someone, and we have friends in common, we're going to see them somewhere, all these things sound to us like in our brain as like future uncomfortable situations, which are not likely to be very enjoyable for us. So that, I think, is the critical factor that makes it so that extroverted feeling actually does make us less likely to get into fights. So if you are watching this and you're trying to figure out if you are a feeler judger yourself, or if you're just in general trying to nail down your type and you're interested in getting some help, you can go to whattype.com/mytype to learn about Skype sessions. And if you're interested in becoming a Myers-Briggs profiler, if you're interested in learning how to tell what Myers-Briggs types people are in different contexts, you can go to whattype.com/lessons. And if you like this sort of discussion about type, then don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.